Oi, 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 good morning. This is Cody.
Good morning, this is Manuel. Today we have
So,
another lesson for you. Lesson number 3, in this case, linter formatter type checks. But tea, what tea do you drink?
the same tea I had in the last video, the green tea from China.
Yeah,
Um, I'm still stuck with it. I still need some more grounding, I guess, and buy better tea. But it's good. Currently, it's difficult times, so I stick to it. That's my difficult time is drinking this tea and getting
this
to
is
the
so
bottom of
bad.
it.
Okay.
No, it's not that bad if you use it in a pot, but I always brew it in my nice set.
hmm
And with that, you get more intensity out. And also for me, that means I get more bitterness.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if it's a bad tea, so it's kind of like,
Left and right. Yeah.
what are you drinking?
Yeah, for me it's still the jasmine because I like it this much. Yeah, it's
Oh, I
such a good
see.
tea. Yeah.
Ah,
Ah,
jasmine, I'm out of jasmine. Maybe I go for that next one.
yeah, or you come over. I have
Yeah, we do a
plenty of
video like
jasmine.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe once. All right, let's get into
Okay.
it, right? So we have linter formatter type checks. Let's walk through here. So first, linting. Yeah, that's a funny one. Because I included that in a project and it just punched me in the face like crazy. So what does a linter do? Linter checks your code for quality, for issues, for standards, you could say. If you're missing a doc string, it will punch you in the face. If you have a variable which you're not using later on in your method, it will punch you in the face. It generally just will punch you in the face. But it's good because it will lead you to write better code. So don't fight the linter. Be thankful for all the nice messages you get from the linter. So this is the state of mind I try to be in. So does not
You know,
always work. I have to be yeah clear
I
about
had
this.
I had once a girlfriend. She really kicked me in the balls quite often, and I must say it sounds a bit harsh, but I appreciate a bit of hard truth
hmm
in your face.
Yeah,
Kind of. Some people they block it. I guess I don't have a strong ego to block it enough, but it's really nice if you sometimes get like just like slapped so hard in the face. And the linter is really, like you say, is one of these where you're like,
yeah,
ah, shit. Okay. Oh.
yeah. Yeah, you can be confident as much as you want with your code. The linter will get you. So, at least in my
Yeah.
experience,
It's
that's
a good
always the
teacher.
case. It's a
A
good
good
teacher.
teacher is also just honest and straight.
Yeah, yeah. And it will make your code better, for sure. And also, you will develop coding habits because right now, when I'm writing code and I just create a new method, I immediately think of, oh, the linter will punch me if I don't include a doc string. Better do one now. So you create also those habits, those good habits, which will make your code eventually a lot better. So, yeah. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, we didn't prep it, but maybe at the end we can still make a video to run the linter over your project then, and show it to the
Oh,
people.
yeah. Yeah, we could do
I'm
that.
curious how it will turn out because also I reviewed the code thoroughly.
Yeah.
Might be that there's still stuff inside. You will see, like human eye is so deceptive
Yeah,
regarding what
definitely.
the linter checks.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, maybe we can do that. All right, so we have linters we use. For example, here the Flake 9 and here's Flake 8. What's that about, Cody?
I
Is
hate you already. That
it...
was a typo. Yeah, the Flake 9, or it's basically Flake 8. But the thing is, you have this pyproject.toml.
yeah,
It's this file in which your poetry is set up for your packages.
yeah.
And what's really beautiful about it is a lot of tools in Python nowadays they can use this toml file for configuration. So
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
I have one project in my work environment where I have like 8 additional dot files just to configure the project, which
Oh,
is
all right.
horrible.
Yeah,
I mean, imagine it, 8 files, which
yeah.
are kind of like, I have this one and that one, and which one was it again? Then
Mm-hmm.
they all have config like names, so you're not always sure which tool has which,
Yeah.
you know. So it's really cool in Python that you can put most of the stuff, not everything. Some tools don't support it in this toml file,
Yeah.
And Flake 9 supports that kind of for Flake 8. Though I'm not sure if Flake 8 supports it now by itself. I would have needed to check that.
Okay. Yeah,
But
maybe we
it was
can check that and include it in the
no, that's
comments.
part of the job too.
Yeah.
Sometimes stuff changes over time. You never check that until you ask yourself the question. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's
could well
totally
be.
fine.
And also, what I'd like to add is if you have different config files, they also have the same parameter. For example, the line length, you have to set that for flag 8 or for, I don't know, for pylint, for example. So you have the
Yeah,
same thing, and you also have to check each file that they are the same for the same parameter. And if you have that just in one file, it's a lot easier because you just scroll through and you see, okay, 100, 100 makes sense.
the important part is with linting is you want everyone to have the same code quality submitting.
Yep,
So it's a no-brainer to have a linter, you
yep,
know.
yep.
And what's the most important part is really that everyone has the same linter and the same settings. And what
Mm-hmm.
Poetry does nice is first of all it pulls the same version of
Yeah,
the linting
yeah,
or the linters.
yeah.
And the second, of course, is that like Manu, you said it so beautifully. It sounds a bit cheesy, I know,
Yeah.
but as a developer, I really feel the pain behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That the settings align. Sometimes they both fight each other. Like, no,
Yeah.
this is not okay. This line is too long, and the other one is then complaining, no, this is okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can also use multiple. Like here, the standard default is Flake 8 and Pylint
Mm-hmm.
usually.
Yeah.
Both together, both kind of check a little bit different stuff. You can add more if you want to, depending on the quality criteria. Those two usually are enough for me. I don't need
Mm.
more, but yeah, whatever you like as a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also pretty cool here, very important to note, you have poetry add minus minus dev, which
Yeah.
adds a dev dependency. It's kind
Right.
of like then later, if your users install it, they don't install the linters. It's not
Mm.
a direct dependency of the package. It's a development dependency, so just your developers will have it.
Yeah.
So just a side note, nothing important.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need it for just running the code you wrote, so it would be just an overhead for the average user. So yeah, it's a good practice to just include into your dev dependency, and that's also one of the main benefits of using Poetry, so that you can easily just define your dev dependencies. All right, so Flake 8, Flake 9, and Pylint. Anything else you have used in the past? Some things you didn't like or stuff?
I must say my memory is too fuzzy there because I set it
Okay.
always up and copy it from project to project. The only
Yeah.
thing which I do is, which is that noted a little bit lower, of course, the settings. Did you adapt the settings ever yourself?
The settings for,
The linting, for example.
I think, yeah, for Flake 8, I did that. But,
Okay, because there's a lot of taste in what they like. If you take
mm-hmm.
them and enable everything, it kind of throws a lot of stuff also in your face. Where I'm always a bit like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
please,
Don't be so hard.
don't be
Yeah.
so hard on me.
Yeah.
Like life's already pretty bad. No, there's a lot of taste still in it. So every project I see
Yeah.
also at work or something, usually they 4 or 5 or 6 rules they uh, individually trigger, kind of disable or whatever, or set the settings differently and stuff.
Yeah.
So if you feel like default settings don't work for you, it's a bit odd and brutal. I feel you. Many people work with that, they
Yeah.
change stuff.
Yeah. For example, the line length or so. I mean,
Yeah, 80 is nothing.
80 is nothing, but I think that was just also from a time where you had 4:3 aspect ratio monitors, and then you had very low pixel density, so you didn't have the space to display all that. So I think 80 characters was once a limit just by the screen manufacturers,
Yeah.
but that's a long time ago, and now we have widescreen monitors and could display a lot more than just 80 characters. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this is one thing which is also changing over time, and that's perfectly fine to just change the settings. or if you just have, like in the lesson here, you have a small project where you have your functions documented well enough, so you don't need a module docstring. I mean, you have one module, what you want to document it with one file in it, it would not make much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's okay to just change the settings, but also, as it's mentioned here, if you change a setting from the default value, you should have a reason and also document that. Because if you
Yeah.
include that here, that's so great for the user or the dev colleague, because he looks at the file, that's why you changed that, and not just like, oh, I don't need that. Why did he do that, right? So
I see
explain
coding
yourself.
with you already taught you a good deal, man.
Yeah,
This is such
it's
a
crucial, right?
revelation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, to know why stuff is like how it's done, that's important to know. And I think there's a lot of potential trouble because you, as a software developer in your own project, feel comfortable, right? And you do stuff and you think, well, that's perfectly normal. Everybody knows that. But they
Yeah.
don't. But they don't. So to be a little bit over commenting on your code is not a bad habit. So
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, you can alter the settings. In this case, we would suggest that you do that in your Poetry PyProject toml file. So it's all in one file. And for example, here the missing module docstring is disabled, so that you will not get a warning again for missing module docstring. And you see,
Yeah.
by the way, how you run that, right? If you have Poetry, you have Poetry run pylint dev star. That's a large command, right? You have to keep that in
Yeah.
mind and type it. And even if you're a fast typer, yeah, it's a pain in the ass, right? So, and this is the second thing, or the second tool we want to talk about in this lesson. It's about task file, which is also a thing I came to love. It just makes life so much easier because you just don't have to remember all that command
Maybe
overhead.
show a task file. It's in
Yeah.
the repo.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, here. You
Like
see?
it's basically
Yeah.
a really cool tool. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. No. It's okay. Yeah, you have your task file which you specify the version, and you have different tasks. For example, here the one with install. So you could later just type in task install, and then it will execute the commands you have defined here. So here it's just poetry install, and you have a description, and you can also, if you just write, I think tasks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just task. Yeah.
yeah, it's just task. Then you get a list of all the commands with the description of it. And here comes the beauty of it. You have different commands in line which will get executed one by one. And so you have this whole pattern which you would have to type in by hand each time you want to do the linting operation like this. You have just one line which is task lint, and that's it.
The thing is, usually as a developer, you have always complicated commands because sometimes you need to, the same as in config files, you disable stuff, you need to do it in the command line often too when you run any programs because
Right.
everything is in the configs.
Yeah.
So the trouble is in the end you have long commands. What's usually been done is that's more common in the Unix area is putting it into something like called a makefile.
Yeah. Right.
But there are a lot of trouble with makefiles. That's the first thing. I'm not too happy with all the functionality inside of it. And the second thing is it doesn't work on Windows.
Yeah.
In TestFile is the first thing I encounter which beautifully works on both operating systems. So most of the stuff should work just out of the box if you don't screw up the task commands inside. And like you said, you can just see what's inside and then run it. And every dev does that usually, that you have this scripts or files which set up everything. So, I have no clue. I open the project. What do
Yeah.
I do? First, run task. I
Yeah.
see the commands.
Yeah.
Usually I see something like install or setup or something. And then just out of the blue, I usually run those when I go to a new project. And then I see, usually it works, because the devs do a great job at it. Now I'm like, geez, this is such a revelation, and not having to think about what to type, also for linting.
Yeah.
It's all set up then, you just run task lint and it runs it. And I'm like, oh, this is such a gratefulness,
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's the same feeling I had when I first used that, because if you're working with repositories, or if you're just a rather beginner or medium coder, you are thankful for stuff like this, because it very shortly describes what actions you would perform to, for example, lint or format your code. So
What's
actually,
also great
yeah,
is in that sense, you have not only your developers to run the same commands for linting and that stuff,
right,
but also later what you do is you automate that in a CI/CD pipeline where before you merge a PR, all the checks run. And for
right,
that, you can also use that command. So you kind of save yourself a lot of duplication and work
yeah,
by clustering it into this file. And now that you have two really anchors in your file, in your project, which are super. The first one is, of course, the PyProject or toml file where most of the settings will go. So
mm-hmm.
that's one anchor. And the second one is your task file where most of your commands go. So it's really cool because if you ever search for something, usually in those both now, you will find whatever you're looking for.
Yeah. So it's just two places and you're done. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Even if you don't know the tools, you could still go in one of these two files and search if there's something like that for them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you would maybe find it and then you could work on that or see what has been done or something.
mm-hmm.
Super, really
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I think also in the beginning I just wrote those commands down because I had to remember it. So I learned about how to do formatting, how to do linting and stuff like that. So I just tried to remember that. So I wrote it into a file anyway. So to have it in a task file makes even more sense, because it's then just one file and it's easily readable. You can just go through here and see what it is, and yeah, it's just like a little command line interface for your development processes, right?
Task is a secret hint from me.
Yeah,
Like also in the professional environment, it's not like you see it
it's
often.
not
It's kind of
distributed,
like
right? Yeah.
it's pretty unknown actually
Mm-hmm.
still. Um, but I have never witnessed anyone like if you show it usually to people, they're like, oh wow, they're like, this is wow, this is one of those things you see and you just want. What's also good to know is, by the way, the format you write this task file in is YAML,
Mm-hmm.
except for of course the commands later. That's just command line syntax, whatever your command line is.
Yeah. Yeah, that will also help you tremendously if you want to do a CI/CD pipelines later on, because those files are usually also done in YAML, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they are also YAML. That's nice. Yeah, you're right.
So good thing to
Okay.
know. All right, let's go back to the lesson. So we described a little bit about how to do the settings here, and then the task file. So we start with a simple code here, and just for the linting, and then you can just use this task to just show what tasks you have available, and task lint would be the command to just execute this one, and so you don't have to remember that. Pretty cool. Yeah, and I think, yeah, here's a little bit more of description what you could do also with it. So more linting here. So here's not just flag 8, but also the pylint will get executed. And here you have the settings, right? For example, the max line length, and other settings like that. So max complexity. What
I
is
like
this?
I really I really love that because sometimes even if you don't look something up, it's good to drop a note that you have no clue what it is, but it annoyed you or something.
Yeah,
I mean
yeah,
that's a if it's not important, you can do stuff like this, but please always let people know if you had no clue what you did there. You know,
yeah, yeah.
that's I really don't know still what it is, and I should have looked it up. So I'm kind of like a little bit like, you know. I think it's a bit about the complete branch complexity, if I
Hmm.
remember it correctly. If you have a lot of branching and indentation levels that you go to the right and that stuff, I think then complexity
That
hits
could
in
be.
if I'm,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, but
Yeah, but yeah, it's a good advice to not pretend that you know what it is if
exactly.
you don't know, because then you just write something which is complete bullshit, and the others will have a hard time figuring out what you actually meant by it. And if you just have it in simple plain English, I didn't have a clue about it. Still don't have it, but I set it as a default, That's far better than, this is about the max number of indentation. And actually, it is something different. Yeah. So, yeah, think it's good advice.
Just be honest. That's
Yeah.
all. Just be honest.
Yeah. Like in life. All right. So one thing you will get punched in the face right away is formatting. If you don't have spaces at the right positions, so the linter will get every format, because it's also very easy to check that. But actually, we just discussed that also earlier a little bit about the doc strings. Is there not a way to just format it correctly? There are auto formatters, and it's definitely a must, I would say, to have a formatter before the linter, because you don't want to do that all by yourself. So formatting. One of those tools you could use is Black. And you can also just install it with a development dependency. It's like that. And usually that's not so hard on you like the linting with like 8. So it will just format your files, and if it, I don't know really know, but I think there could also be problems with formatting, right? So it will tell you that. But I'm not sure if it really ever aborted and I had to change something manually. I think had.
the reason is because you code in Visual Studio Code and it recognizes, I think, the black that you're using, black
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
So I think it automatically already uses that, and it recognizes the pyproject.toml in your project. So he also
Right.
recognizes the same settings.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you never had any trouble. Linting is a really Achilles heel in unprofessional setups.
Yeah.
What still happens in some of our projects is I was working on some API in Golang, and it generates some files which are in JSON, I think. And the thing is, we have the formatting set up for the Golang part of the code, but not for the JSON part of the code. So in VS Code, for example, there is prettier and other formatters for JSON content. So
Yeah.
every time I do a PR and then my colleague, we kind of swap, because then my code is different. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the PR goes from 80 changes to, I don't know, 500,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's, that's one lesson also I want to teach is, this is now for Python code, but you might
Yeah.
have different files
Yeah.
which are not under this protection. And you can think about doing it for the other files, but usually then I say, it's a generated file. Like, I don't bother too much with it. If it's all the time like this and it annoys me too much, then of course I do something, but don't do something the right way. But yeah, formatting definitely. Black is pretty cool because it just does a good job out of the box, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
yeah. Also, one thing to note is really cool in the task command. You see it there. There are two options. You can run it as a formatter or just as a check.
Yeah.
And in the task command, we just run it as a check, because later when it runs in the CI/CD pipeline, during linting step, basically, we just want to check if the code is fine. We don't want to change the code and then have to commit it or something in the CI/CD pipeline usually, and don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and if it's okay, it just runs through, and then if it's not okay, it will throw some error. We will see how many files had to be changed. Yeah. All right, and also here, Black, you have the same parameter here again with the line length. So set those two equal to flag 8 and the formatter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
they should not be fighting each other. Yeah, that's not a good idea. But actually, I did what I did is I had on different machines different formatters installed. I didn't know why, but and they were fighting each other. So with the commit changes, because it will just format it differently. So it's so important to have the same setup for your development.
I remember in the beginning
machines.
when we did our shared project, we had formatting fights between us, I think before I set up the Black.
I think so, yeah.
I think so too. Yeah, it was always back and forth, and I was always, no.
Why?
Because then the PR is so big and nothing changed, and you're like, my eyes, just so tired of.
Yeah. Yeah, better make sure that you have the same thing. And that's also another point for poetry, because you can easily just specify it there and then you are set up. So,
Yeah.
all right. Anything more you want to add to formatting, or should we go to the type checks?
Go to the type
All
checks.
right,
Let's
type
go to the hard
checks.
part.
Hardcore. So, what are types? You know that every variable has its own type, but Python is not a statically typed language, so it's used more for dynamic typing. So you could, for example, yeah, you all know that. I have to go. I have not. I don't know, but I don't need to go through the every detail of it. So you know that you have not the typed version of the language, but you can give type hints. And it's actually pretty good to do this, because the linter will punch you in the face even more. Um, because it knows more what's right or wrong. Because the advantage of typed languages is that at compile time you can sort of get rid of a lot of errors you could not get rid of if you have a dynamically typed language, right? Because in a dynamically typed language you have so much more freedom to do and so much more freedom to also screw it up. And if you give type hints, you constrain yourself knowing that this will be this type, and then you cannot do some of the operations on this variable, and so it knows if you screwed up on some part of the code. So it's actually a good practice to do type hints every time, I would say, right?
Yeah. Like if you come to me without type ins, I'm gonna slap you.
Yeah.
No, this is
Yeah,
like
this basic level.
I really dislike Python, because it's really the thing is with Python code you cannot make it as secure as a compiled language, even with all the
Yeah.
linting. You golden blessedness, it's so ridiculously unstable if you don't check it thoroughly, that you
Mm-hmm.
need to use everything you have, throw all the weapons at this freaking language, so you make sure if you use it in a production environment that it does what it's supposed to be, you know.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
even if you throw all of these tools we show you, the two linters, one formatter,
Yeah.
one type checker,
Yeah.
even if you throw all of these at the code, it still might not be enough, you know. And this is why I love compiled languages for more professional stuff, a bit more when stuff gets really serious and more dire. Because
Mm-hmm.
for sure with Python you're faster, but even with all these tools you need to incorporate, it might still not be good enough by far, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
What I really dislike also about Python is it has type-ins, but it's some languages use it, or libraries better said. They recognize what's in there and they do some magic with it and stuff. So that's
Mm-hmm.
cool because there's this runtime inspection you can do there, for those who want to do a bit more fancy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really dislike is they don't use the type hints really at the runtime at all otherwise, you know.
All right. Yeah.
And what I really love is TypeScript, for example, is basically JavaScript with types.
Yeah.
But what they do in between is you write TypeScript and then they just transpile it. So they just take TypeScript in and write out JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this transpilation or compilation step. They say compilation, but it's not really compilation. It's a transpiler. Has the advantage that it's really checked.
Yeah.
Like at least you know stuff, what's going on. And what I really love about TypeScript too is there's this, I'm gonna get hurt by someone who's a front-end professional now, but there's this any type. So in case something's not working out, you can always ask for an excuse and say, okay, this is in any, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
And what I love about it is in compiled languages, you cannot do that, you know? And sometimes you have to go a long way around in some languages to get around the problem of, it's called reflection, to figure out what type it is and then to
Mm-hmm.
convert it and stuff like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. So it's not like in the object class in Java, because everything is an
Yeah,
object.
yeah, kind of.
Kind of. Yeah.
Every language has its own approach a bit there
Mm.
when it comes to
Yeah.
reflection. That's
Yeah.
maybe an
Yeah.
interesting lesson for all of you if you ever want to look it up.
Yeah.
We could maybe make a video someday about it,
Mm-hmm.
to talk a bit about reflection in all the languages I was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also a big topic.
That's a big topic.
And a lot of things can go wrong there. So
Yeah.
yeah, for the type
So
checks, yeah, do it.
yeah, so in Python, definitely, if you can do it, do it.
Yeah,
Only warning, I give you a big warning, it doesn't work with every library. If you
right.
do something a bit odd, like for example, what I sometimes do or like to do is write a web server.
Mm-hmm.
And with a web server, you can use a protocol to communicate.
Yeah,
There are different protocols. You can use JSON, which is the most common
mm-hmm.
one. But what I like to do is if just machines communicate in between themselves, I want to have it efficient. So I use a binary format or
Yeah,
protocol.
yeah,
And what I like to use is protobuf because it's very standard.
yeah.
You are pretty good with it, and you save a lot of bandwidth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does some code generation magic. And if you have mypy, nah, I try to get it to work. You can get it to work somehow. But some libraries and some stuff you do, if you go a little bit out of the box, it might not work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can also fully understand if you come around to the project and say, I could spend now 1.5 weeks getting this to run, but
Yeah,
I need to get this project working.
yeah,
I just disable it. I
yeah,
would be like, if I would be your technical lead, I
yeah.
would just say, yeah, that's fine. Come on, let's get some traction in the project. Screw it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or maybe just excluded protobufs parts of your code.
It's not so
It's
easy.
not so easy, yeah. I think so, because it has to look at the software as a whole. And if you just
Yeah,
exclude files, then it will just give an error because I don't know what this method does. So I give you an error. Yeah, yeah,
because
okay.
if you need to ask for excuses, you need to tell how that works actually underneath.
Yeah,
But then you always, when you change the format, which you communicate, like what input arguments go into
yes,
the web server,
yeah.
then you also might always have to adapt somewhere some excuses. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really not what you want to end up with. You
Okay,
want to
yeah.
automate the whole process. If you can't do it, it's going to hurt you all the time because other developers will not know this,
Mm-hmm.
how it works necessarily, how you do it. And you really want to avoid complexity. Put it in a task file if you can. If not,
Mm.
then you're in trouble if it gets too complex.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, stay easy. I think that's the main route to go, as always.
and
And
automate.
yeah, and also talking about easy, we talked a lot about the development issues and how they could be improved using the task file. But actually, what's also possible to just have it as an easy setup for the user. If you have a multi-step install process, for example, you just have a
Yeah.
task for install, and then the user can just clone your repo and then just task install. For sure, he has to or he or she has to install task beforehand, but once that is set up, task install just executes the install process, and that's a pretty easy way to do this.
Yeah. So this
Right.
is a really professional setup you would
Yeah.
have after this. I think everyone who would look at this project would be like, okay, that person knows what that person does. Like if you have an interview, you set it up like this. You can set it up once for an example project, so you don't
Yeah.
have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and then you would have a coding task you would have to do. For example, when I interview people, we look at this stuff very thoroughly. We look at it like, how do they set up everything around it? Like 30% during a coding interview, I'm interested into the code, why they did what, how.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, I look around how did they integrate this? Because if you work in a team of 8, where I am in, you don't have time to explain people all the time what does. So if you
Yeah.
do a thorough job like this, it's mandatory.
Mm.
It's really mandatory. And sometimes we
Mm.
have people coming into the team from outside, from other teams, or I go into other teams. And if we don't do this work very thoroughly like this, it just won't work. If I
Yeah.
need to tell them run poetry, run pylint minus minus show source, or whatever other fancy command,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That it's,
Yeah.
and that's so important. I want to teach you with this, or we want to teach you with this course, especially is professional development is a lot not about coding. It's
Yeah.
a lot about knowing everything around it and how to set it up and how to have a good setup for the people around you.
Yeah. Yeah. To integrate it, and also to have the files here where you can just look it up. I mean, that's so beneficial. Also, if you just work with teams, you don't have to explain the fancy commands, but you can give the task file, and if someone does not understand the fancy commands, he can look it up. He or she could look it up for themselves, right? So yeah, that's a great way of also doing corporations. Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you for watching again. If you have any questions, comments, something you want to discuss, hop on to your on our Discord server, or just leave a comment here on the video. And yeah, anything you want to add, Cody?
No, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
You like Manu said, use the means which are available, which is communicating with us. If
Yep.
you want to know anything or have own experiences also with the linter and that stuff, that's such a big area.
Yeah.
We kind of gave you here a little best practice, which works fine. But share your experience if you have some other setups.
Right.
We're curious to hear about it and also about your happiness and joy and pain with all of these tools.
Yeah. Yeah. All right then. Have a
Okay,
good day,
then.
and see you in the next lesson. Bye,
Bye
guys.
bye.